Welcome back to Ty and That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good pal, Ty Franck.
Yeah, and today we're talking about episode 2 of the first season of The Expanse, The Big Empty. It was written by, who wrote that? Was that Mark and Hawk, or was that Narain? That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Hold on.
Who cares? Who cares about the writer?
Yeah, the writer's the most irrelevant part of this process. Yeah, but I do know it was directed by your friend and mine, Terry McDonough.
Terry McDonough.
The mad Irishman.
You know what's crazy? It was I had a really surreal moment watching episode 2 today, because a few hours earlier, we were doing table read for 601, and I'm in quarantine here in Canada. We're getting ready to shoot season 6. To go back and watch episode 2, and it's kind of like watching old home movies of your family, or like your yearbook, your high school yearbook. I mean, it was 6 years ago, and you're watching that. Yeah. And to think that the show would become what it's become, and then for us to get to season 6, it's mind-blowing. And what's really interesting to see is that antenna scene with Holden and I on top of the night. My wife was in labor during that scene. And
oh yeah, that's right. We were trying to get you out of Toronto.
Yeah, you guys were trying to get me out of Toronto. So, maybe we'll talk about the episode, and then when we get to that, I'll tell the story. But just saying, on a personal note, it's been a surreal, emotional day, doing a table read for 601, being in quarantine here in Toronto, which has been our home for 6 years. And then watching 102 and the memories that came back. And then it's just, it's crazy to think. Would you ever would have guessed?
No. So in the first season, Daniel and I were brought in. We were given a producer title. Our contract included a producer title for the life of the show. But it was the kind of producer title you give to novelists. It was producer in name only. We were hanging around on the set, but we didn't have jobs to do. We had written one episode of the first season. It was episode 7, so it was much later in the process when our episode got filmed. And so those first couple episodes, we were just sort of hanging around, learning the business, watching you guys work. There was no understanding of what all this could turn into for us. We didn't know. I mean, how could we know, right? And so, we were just sort of wandering around like children on the playground, just kind of looking at all the shiny toys and the fun stuff. Looking back on it now as a 6-year jaded television writer and producer, all I see now is the mistakes. All the shit I would get. I would, like, if I look at it now and go, like if I had been an EP back then, I would have told him to fix that. I would have told him to change that. But obviously I didn't have I didn't have much voice in the process in that first season.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, it's crazy to me to think about that first season when I first met you, and it was so valuable to have you on set because nobody knew the world better than you and Daniel. But from where you started out to where you are now in the show and how important you are to the show, I mean, how much you've learned in 6 years is pretty remarkable. Pretty special.
Well, to be fair, I can't take all the credit for that. To be fair, Narain Shankar, our showrunner, is a very generous boss in that he's generous with his time.
And he had pity on you.
He had pity on us. But that's how I get through life, is I try to attract as much pity as possible, and then people help me and give me things. But he was super generous with us. He helped us learn the craft of writing for TV, and I would follow him around on set and just ask him questions. He'd tell people to do stuff, and then I'd wander over and go, "Hey, why did you tell them to do that? What does that mean? Why would we rather do that than this other thing?" And he was always willing to answer the questions. And after a while, he got so used to me doing that, he just started taking me everywhere. Like, he'd come find me and he'd say, "Hey, I'm about to go meet with the art department. You should come with me." And so pretty soon I was in almost everything, just because he got so used to having me around. And after the meeting, and I was good at not saying anything. I was good at keeping my mouth shut. So we'd go to these meetings, and afterwards we'd leave and go back to the office. And I go, "Okay, so in that meeting, this guy said this. What did that mean? You said this. What did that mean?" So I'd save all my questions till afterwards. And I mean, that's how I learned the business, is just following him around and asking him questions.
And then how did that progress every season? I mean, was there a big jump in your responsibilities, or was it little by little each season?
Well, so we wrote an episode for season 1 and everybody seemed to like it. Actually, based on the strength of that first episode we wrote for the show, Alcon, the studio, actually bought a pilot from us. Sharon Hall, who was our executive producer in the first season, came to us and said, "Oh, it turns out you guys actually know how to write." And she bought she gave us a pilot deal. So that we had some credibility then, which was nice that, they were like, "Oh, these guys actually can write a screenplay." So we're not just there in name only. So between season 1 and season 2, our manager renegotiated our contract. And in season 2, we became supervising producers on the show with an actual writing producer credit rather than just sort of a producer and name only credit. And then every year after that, we moved up another level. So by season 5, we were EPs.
Was there anything that surprised you being a novelist? I mean, I know you were on the set of Game of Thrones and you were involved in that whole situation, but seeing how an actual show works, was there anything that surprised you? What was the most interesting about it, and what was most disappointing?
Well, I mean, everything surprises you. You've never been there before.
Right.
I don't remember what was the most surprising or the most, I mean, the things that are disappointing are
the actors.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, watching you mangle my golden dialogue with your half-assed performance, that was pretty tough to get through. Oh, no. I mean, the things that are disappointing are the things you wish you could get back. A moment, because the thing with TV and it's so different from features, and you've worked in both features and TV, so you've seen both versions of this. In features, they'll take 3 days to shoot half a page.
Right.
In TV,
they'll take 3 days to set the lighting.
Right. To shoot half a page the 4th day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In TV, we're often shooting 6, 7, 8 pages a day. So the pace of it is insane. And it's when you're moving that fast, it's really easy through nobody's fault. Everybody's trying to do the best job they can. Right. And everybody's really good at their jobs, but it's really easy to drop a ball that you don't realize was dropped.
Right.
Until you're in the editing room. And then you're like, "Oh my God, I wish we had that back. I wish I had noticed that was happening." Because I know, like if anybody noticed it was happening, we would have just told the director or whatever, and they would have fixed it on the spot and it would have been fine. But you see it in the editing room, and by then it's too late. You'll never get it back.
Right before I started shooting The Expanse, I just finished the Mockingjay movies. Literally just finished. I was on a break from the Mockingjay movies when I auditioned for The Expanse, and that whole process of The Expanse happening was while I was overseas doing the Mockingjay movies, and I got in that rhythm of that big feature, 3 days to light. And I remember you would go in, you would rehearse, and you go back to your trailer, and we would all hang out, drink and have a good time. You come back, you shoot for a little bit, and you go back and hang out. And so I got in that rhythm. I remember going to The Expanse and getting back to the trailer. I'd get my, take my outfit off. I would sit and I'm like, "We need you now. Go, go, go." I'm like, "Oh, Jesus Christ."
Is that why you were always running onto set with no clothes on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those are different times. But it's an adjustment to get back into the speed of television, and I actually prefer that kind of fast-paced action, more than the slower pace. But it's a rhythm that you have to get into, and I feel as if I just start getting the hang of it on episode 10 when we're finishing filming, and then we're done filming, and I'm just starting to catch up with everything.
I think. If people were being honest, I think we'd all say we feel that way. I mean, just about the time I remember how to write a good script, we're done writing scripts. Like if you give me episode 11, put me in, coach. Like I'll write the shit out of episode 11. But you're done then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was crazy. Starting to watch this episode, you really, and then knowing in watching and living the whole arc of all these characters and the relationships and the whole arc of the series itself. It's really interesting and fascinating to start to see the beginning of it. Like seeing when Miller going into Julie Miles' apartment for the first time, and him slowly starting to notice her, him slowly being interested in her beyond what the case is. And there's all these little seeds that are planted in there. Like noticing the scar on her chin and hearing the story about her doing, jiu-jitsu on that guy, messed him up. Yeah. That was harassing her, and he kind of had a little smile, It was also fascinating seeing the dynamic of the Rossi crew and us start to meet, like operate with each other, learn who each other is, and the whole relationship. And we're at odds in the beginning, and I didn't remember that I almost shot Holden in the back of the head, in the scene when he was putting out that transmission. And that transmission, to think about it, it's so interesting to think, because ever since Holden puts out that transmission, he's no longer anonymous, and that's when that is the thing that thrusts him into this worldwide, universe-wide fame, and the thing that it is the thing that propels him through the rest of the series. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it and it's that way in the books as well. I mean, that's it's the same in the show and the books, that he makes the fateful decision to send out that broadcast to the entire solar system, talking about the destruction of the Canterbury, talking about why they think Mars might be involved. All of that stuff goes out and alters the course of the solar system for the next however many years, and thrusts him into the spotlight, like you said, turns him into a bit of a celebrity, or an anti-celebrity, depending on who you're talking to. I'm sure Officer Allah wouldn't have called him a celebrity.
Now, as they're connecting the dots, the night, and they're in there, and the Rossi crew are connecting the dots, and they're talking about stealth technology. Is this the beginning of Marco? Are they starting to get the seeds of Marco getting the stealth technology for the rocks that he hurls at Earth?
Yeah. So you're talking about when Avasarala is, she's following up on that. In episode 1, she questions that belter that they've captured.
Yeah, she captures a belter, but also within the Rossi crew, they realize that it's stealth technology of the ship that came out and killed the Canterbury.
Do they realize that, or is that? I guess you're right. Yeah, and they talk about you're right, and they talk about the only Mars have that level of stealth technology. Yeah, right. That's right.
And we see Alex for the first time saying, "You guys don't know what the fuck you're talking about. So Mars would not."
Yeah,
we start to see his patriotism.
Yeah, and they are sort of laying those seeds in. But, I mean, as people have noticed, and we have seen people talking about this online, I mean, it does tie back to those first couple episodes, all the stuff that's happening now on the show, because they've captured a belter who was trying to steal some stealth tech. So clearly, Marco's faction has been trying to get a hold of that stuff in show terms for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. That's always been his goal, is to get that. And, they caught the guy in season 1. And then now we're in season 5, and clearly he's gotten it, and he found a different way to get it. In the first season, they're trying to steal it. By season 5, he's buying it. And, as the season goes on, we reveal more of how he actually managed to do that. But yeah, they've been, these seeds that we're putting in these early episodes, some of these seeds don't pay off for 4, 5, 6 years.
That's, to me, the greatest benefit of having this long running book series to be your skeleton, to be your framework, your scaffolding to build this series off of. Yeah. Because you can plant these seeds and you see the beginning of these arcs. You see the relationship between, a scene that I was talking about earlier is when Holden and Amos are up on top of the night fixing the antenna.
Yeah.
And Amos tries to explain to him, and I didn't remember. It's so interesting to go back and see this, but Amos is trying to explain to him how his mind works the best he can, right? Yeah. And Holden means nothing to him. It's so interesting to see how far their relationship has evolved from this season back to first season. But basically saying I could, I don't operate the same way you do.
Yeah, I will admit, I thought you did a really nice job there, and I've always liked Mark and Hawk's scripts, and they did write that second one. I would have written that scene a little differently, and everybody has their own approach on things. that's not the attack I would have taken with Amos for that moment, but it at least gets sort of his dysfunction out there on screen in a way that the audience can understand and at least starts that journey. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But to talk about that scene, what's interesting is I don't even remember shooting that scene. And the amount of life that we've lived in these 6 years, but when at 3:30 in the morning that night, my wife calls me and says that she is going into labor.
Yeah.
And immediately I said, well, I'm coming home, and I called Narain at 4 in the morning at this point. And him being the phenomenal person and showrunner he is, he answered, and I told him, and he said, all right, we'll take care of it. And I remember Terry, the director, calling, and he said, okay, listen, man, I know you got to go home. I know your wife's having it. And he goes, but this is my last day of shooting this scene. This is the last time we go to get it, because this is, we're going to, so I ended up I called Jen, and Jen says, the doctor thinks it's going to be, that it's going to be a while, that the labor hasn't really fully started yet. It's going to be a second. Go ahead and shoot your stuff, and then get on a plane and come. And so I said, okay. So we show up and shoot, and I can't even think about the scene. I mean, and Steven was amazing in that. And so we shoot all of my coverage of that scene. We race through it, and literally and we do all my coverage, because then they're going to do the reverse with a stand-in.
Yeah.
So we get everything done, and I remember like, go, go, go. And somebody was handing my suitcase. Yeah. This is when I fell in love with the crew. I mean, everybody had my back. They threw me the suitcase. There was a van waiting with a
van waiting outside.
Yeah. They had an escort in the airport to run me through the airport. Yeah. And I get on the plane, and I call Jen, and it's Air Canada, and I call Jen, and I say, hey, I'm there. I'm going to make it. I'll be there for the birth. And then she goes, the baby's coming now. Sorry. And then Air Canada said, you have to turn your phone off. And I mean, that was 6 years ago, but I don't know if it was Air Canada or whatever, but we didn't have internet on the phone.
Yeah.
On the airplane. So the whole flight, 6 hours from Canada to LA, I didn't know what was going on. And Nash was early. My oldest was early. So, that was I might have one or two. Oh man, that was stressful. And then I landed, and then a picture of Nash popped on my phone. It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, you got to be there for the second one.
Yeah, I got to, and then the same exact scenario, but this time, everybody was like, you were not missing this one, and so they made sure I was there for the second.
We planned it a little better the second time. Yeah, a little better planning.
Yeah, I even had a false alarm where they sent me home too soon, and she wasn't. I had to come back and then go again. But yeah, it's pretty.
I'm sure if you've been to one of those things, you've been to all of them.
Yeah, yeah, you've been to one, you've been to all.
I mean, come on,
pretty much the same thing happens.
Yeah, so we've got all that stuff happening on the Rossi there, with and we were talking when we were talking about this episode before we got started, talking about it as the men in the lifeboat story. That it's a classic naval story. And the one that popped into my head that I remember reading years ago. So you've read Mutiny on the Bounty, right?
I haven't read it. I watched it.
Yeah. So that's part of a trilogy of books. That's just the first book. The second book is called Men Against the Sea. And in Mutiny on the Bounty, they take Captain Bligh and like 7 of his officers, and they put them on a lifeboat, like a small boat, and they just push them out to sea and leave them, right? Mm-hmm. The second book is about Bligh and those 7 guys trying to make it to land and survive. And it's the whole book. And it's such a classic story of, because let me backtrack a little bit, because I've used this illustration a lot. People talk about like, well, space is such a harsh environment, and why would anybody ever travel across space? And my answer to that is, space for us now isn't any harsher of an environment than crossing like the Atlantic was in the 1700s. It's just as dangerous. The Atlantic wanted to kill you just as much as space wants to kill you. And so you think about how harsh that environment was, how lethal that environment was. And you put these 8 guys in this small boat with limited supplies, in the middle of nowhere, and you just push them off and say, all right, get out of here. That is such a classic story of survival that you are literally every direction around you is something that wants to kill you. And it wants to kill you all the time. And we're trying to capture that in episode 2 with the night, that you've got these 5 people on this little lifeboat that doesn't have enough air, doesn't have enough supplies, it's been damaged by the explosion, doesn't have much fuel. How are they going to survive? Because literally every direction around that ship is something that wants to kill them, which is space.
And when you knew that this was going to happen in the story, do you use those things for your inspiration when you're writing?
Yeah. Well, I've read a lot of naval fiction, and naval history as well. But, things like the O'Brien books, Master and Commander, and, the Mutiny on the Bounty and Men Against the Sea, and books like that, which really show how dangerous that environment was for seamen back in those days, and how easy it was for just everyone on the ship to die. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, you make one mistake, the ship goes down, everybody just dies, and the kind of people that can work and live in that environment, and what kind of culture that creates, and what kind of mindset that creates, definitely was an influence on all of that early stuff.
Did you see the Peter Weir Master and Commander?
I did. I liked it a lot. I thought it was great. It was
a great movie.
Yeah, that's actually 2 of his books. They took 2 different books of his and put him into a single movie, but I thought it worked really well.
Did you hear? I worked with one of the stunt guys, and I think I told you this story before, where Russell Crowe stabbed a guy in the shoulder. So they were sword fighting or whatever, and he literally stabbed one of the guys in the shoulder. And the guy's like, he stabbed me in the shoulder. And afterwards, he had his arm in the thing, and they were at the bar, they were drinking, and he goes, "Come here, let me buy you a beer." Like, the captain, buy you a beer. And he's like, I mean, thank you for buying me a drink, but it doesn't really change the fact that you stabbed me in the shoulder in that situation.
So all of that sort of naval tradition and the idea that you can be lost at sea and the danger of that all fits in here. But, it's not all just that stuff, because there's also the space stuff. I mean, you've got Apollo 13, which is such a classic men in a lifeboat story. You got 3 guys in this tiny little ship that, half the ship is busted open. The power is gone. Air scrubbers are running out, and you have to fly all the way around the moon and back to survive. Trying to capture that sense of and the thing is, backing up again, the thing is that sci-fi over the last 30, 40 years has given people a very skewed perception of what space is. In classic Star Trek and in Star Wars, in those sort of the big franchises, nobody ever dies because they're in space. You die because an alien god hits you with a lightning bolt or somebody shoots you with a blaster, right? You never die because somebody opens the door and all the air goes out of the ship and you just suffocate. That never happens.
Yeah. In Star Wars, they just hang on, and they, and then they just pull themselves back in, and they're
right.
And it's sucking all the stuff out, and they have no problem breathing. It's just when I was young, I was like, "Is space windy? Is it just like windy?" When it opens, I was like, just everything starts blowing around, and they're like, "Ah!" But they hold on.
Yeah, and so think about that you've got this audience that has been educated about space by those movies, and what we're trying to do, because The Expanse, treats space as a real thing, as a real threat, trying to educate the audience on, no, space is actually really scary, and it's really big. And if you're lost in a little tiny ship with not enough air and not enough fuel out in space, you will probably die. That was sort of what we were doing with that second episode, is teaching our audience, this is how things work in the Expanse. They can't just activate the warp drive. They can't use the transporter to get home.
The thing that I love most about Apollo 13 is it's really a demonstration of the art and craft of storytelling.
Yeah.
So if you know how to tell a story, even if you know the ending, so we all know what happened. We all know the ending. And every time you watch it, even if I watch it again, I'm captivated. It pulls you in, and you feel as if you don't know what's going to happen. And that's what the craft and art of telling a good story is. And what that's a.
Yeah. That scene with his son at military school, waiting to hear the news on whether his dad has survived the reentry. It's saying, it's at the end of the movie. He's sitting in class. He's surrounded by the other kids. They're all wearing their little, military school uniforms. And they're listening to the radio, waiting to hear. And like, that's his dad. Like the next thing that could happen is the radio comes back and goes, oh, it looks like the capsule crashed and all the astronauts were killed. Right. He's just sitting there waiting to hear that. I mean, they're like, even though the ending, that's such an intense moment that it's affecting anyway.
What movie do you think is more realistic that shows the reality of space? Apollo 13 or Armageddon?
Well, I mean, they're both classics.
they're both classics.
In Armageddon, you have Steve Buscemi firing a machine gun on an asteroid. I mean, both of those are classic space moments.
Yeah, and they're both realistic,
Yeah.
And have you ever heard Ben Affleck's commentary on Armageddon?
No, I have not.
Dude, he's clearly had one or two, and he just trashes. He just trashes the movie. It's the best. It is hilarious. And and he says in the commentary, he's like, why do they think it's easier to train drillers to be astronauts as opposed to train astronauts to be drillers?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ben.
That's a really good question. But I don't care who you are. In Armageddon, when she says, that's your dad up there, when he goes, Mommy, who's that? And she said, that's your dad. That gets you. That's movie making right there. Storytelling.
I don't even remember that moment. I honestly don't. The only things I remember about that movie, I remember the space shuttles dock with like the space station to get more fuel, and then somehow everything explodes. I don't know how that happened. I don't know why everything exploded when they docked. And then the other thing I remember is Steve Buscemi firing for some reason they've got like a Gatling gun on the asteroid. Like, I don't know why they have that, but Steve Buscemi fires that.
You don't remember all the slow walks in astronaut gear going down the thing?
I don't.
And then leaving on a jet plane, the musical they break into, leaving on a jet plane?
I don't remember. I do. I remember a number of scenes with what's the actor's name? The guy was in the Green Mile. Michael Clark Duncan.
Yeah.
I remember a number of his scenes because I remember watching that and thinking that guy's incredibly charismatic. He's going to do some really good work at some point. And then later I saw him in the Green Mile and he was devastatingly good in the Green Mile.
The Green Mile, man, he was so great in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember him. I remember seeing him and thinking, this guy is special and we're going to see something really interesting with this guy at some point. It was tragic that he died so young. But yeah, like when he was in the Green Mile, I was like, oh, this is the thing I expected. But anyway, so Apollo 13, with the space stuff. The other one you and I talked about, which is not as good a movie as Apollo 13, is
Event Horizon.
Event Horizon. Thank you. Event Horizon. Yeah. But the thing with Event Horizon, even though it's not nearly as good a movie as Apollo 13, it does have some moments where they try to show that it's scary to be in space. When the guy gets thrown off of the ship and he's tumbling through space and he's got to try to get back to the ship before he dies. That actually works in that movie. Like, you understand why he's scared. You understand why it's a frightening thing to be thrown off into space.
Right. But I thought the premise in Event Horizon, where they try to find a wormhole and they end up going through hell. I mean, it's space horror. I like space horror. It's space horror. That movie scared the shit out of me. I thought it was a great movie. And we got to find a way to connect us, because obviously you and I love horror, and we got to find a way to connect some of these episodes. Maybe the proto-molecule monsters. We'll get to some good zombie movies and stuff.
Yeah. We'll get to that stuff definitely.
Yeah. But to get back to the episode, the scene where you know what, I want to talk about the mushroom scene.
Yeah. I've got a story about that.
I know you got this great story, and I love to hear it. Can we tell it, or?
Yeah, I think we could tell it. I mean, we're not gonna throw anybody under the bus here. We won't mention names.
Okay. All right. And I'm sure that was a learning experience for you to see how actors work in that situation. So tell us a story.
Well, okay. So I thought you were going to talk about the scene. So the scene, Thomas Jane as Miller is doing his investigation of the what appears to be the case, which is the water thieves, which it becomes sort of a side thing once he really starts pursuing Julie Mao. But he's still chasing the water thieves. And so he winds up going into the bowels of the station and tracing the pipes. And he's got, there's some other guys there, some workers that like work on the pipes. And they're looking for the pipe that the thieves are stealing the water from. And one of the scenes that we put in there, or that Mark and Hawk put in there, is a scene where, because we talked about the fact that growing up in an environment like that, there are things that other people would consider like gross or you wouldn't do, that if you grew up there would be like no big deal, right? You don't even think twice about it. And one of those was that you'd have mushrooms growing on these pipes because it's dark, it's wet, you're going to wind up with mushrooms, right? And so they had written a scene where they go down in there and one of the workers takes a mushroom off of the pipe and eats it. And that's the scene you're talking about, right?
Yeah. That's the one.
Yeah. It was 3:00 in the morning. I think it was a Friday because, we just talk about that. So the way filming works, for those of you who have never been on a film set or a TV set in Canada, is you can only film for 12 hours and most crew and actors are guaranteed what they call a 12-hour turnaround. So you can film for 12 hours and then you have to give the crew and the actors 12 hours off before you bring them back to film for another 12 hours. The monkey wrench in that is that there is an hour for lunch. So your filming day actually is 13 hours, which means that on Monday, you start out shooting at 7 a.m. and by Friday, that will have moved back at least 5 hours. Anytime you go over during that week, anytime you shoot longer than the 12, which you can do, there's penalties for it, but you can do it. That also pushes the 12 hours back. So we wind up with this thing where like on Friday, you're not starting until like 1 p.m. and you're going till like 3, 4 a.m.
Like you saying push back 5 hours, that's a good week if you only get pushed back 5 hours.
If you only get pushed back 5 hours, you've had a good week.
I mean, the reality is you're like, they call it Friday Day.
Yeah.
Because Friday always ends up, you end up working into Saturday. That's how late you end up going. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So most Saturdays we're getting home at like 4 or 5 a.m. So this was one of those days. It was a Friday. It was like 3:00 a.m. Everybody's fucking tired. And we had a shot with a very difficult reset. So in filming, a reset is when you yell cut and you shoot the same scene again, all the things that have to be put back the way they were at the beginning of the scene. So if somebody shoots at somebody else and it blows a hole in the wall, reset means you got to patch the hole in the wall. You got to put a new squib in there. Or if somebody's got blood on their outfit and when you reset, you got to get the clean outfit that doesn't have the blood on it. So that stuff takes time. So resets are time consuming. This one, because we were in an elevator, rather than use an actual elevator to show the wall passing by, what they did is they put us up on a 30-foot platform and then they had a lift with a wall of pipes that they just lifted up past the platform to make it look like the elevator was going down. Resetting that moving pipe wall was about a 15-minute process for safety reasons. You got to be very safe when you do it. So every time we had to cut and reset, everybody's waiting for 15 minutes to do the next scene. And again, this is at like 3:00 a.m. on a Friday night. And this guy wouldn't eat the mushroom. He would pull the mushroom off of the pipe and then he would just hold it. So Terry, the director, said, yeah, you're supposed to eat the mushroom. And by the way, this wasn't a real mushroom. This was a confectionery made of marzipan, which is a sweet. It's almond paste. It's, food. It's actual food. So they had made this mushroom out of marzipan. So it would be pleasant to eat and it would be hygienic, right? That was the whole point, is to make it hygienic. He would take it off and he would just hold it. And then when Terry said, no, you got, so we reset. Terry's like, no, you got to eat it. That's the thing, is you eat it. And then Miller says some lines to you. So he took it off and he pretended to eat it, like held it like an inch or two from his mouth and went like that. And Terry's like, we can see that on camera, right? like you're not fooling us. Like that's clearly visible on camera that you're not eating it.
Well,
the guy's like, well, I don't really want to eat it. And he's like, so Terry goes, look, you don't have to swallow it. Like if you have some weird thing with marzipan, you don't want to swallow it, that's fine. But put some of it in your mouth, chew it up. And when we get off, when the camera's off of you, you can spin it out into your hand or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just wait until the camera's off of you before you do that. So we go through the reset again, which takes 15 minutes. We start the scene. The guy takes the mushroom. He bites off some. He's chewing on it. We go over to Thomas. The camera moves over to focus on Thomas. And then you hear two. And that marzipan thing shoots across camera right in front of Tom's eye line. Like right across his eye line. Just this like mushroom thing flying past. And Terry's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, you said I could spit it out. And he's like, not across the camera. Like, wait till the camera's not on you and put it in your hand or something, dude. And meanwhile, Tom is getting furious.
He did, yeah.
So Tom goes over to him and he goes, look, man, you found a mushroom. That's rare. You're excited to find that mushroom. You're excited to eat that mushroom. Work with me here, man. Work with me. You're like so happy to eat a mushroom. And the guy goes, oh, okay. And so Tom's like telling the guy, please, God, for the love of God, get us out of here before 4 a.m. Walks over. And Terry turns to me and he goes, I think Thomas might throw, because we're up 30 feet in the air. And he goes, I think Thomas might throw that man off the platform. And as soon as he says that, Joel, the first AD, leans over and goes, nobody will see nothing.
Dude, throughout this podcast, we're going to have a lot of good Joel gems.
Yeah.
But that, I've never seen Thomas get fired up on set. So that must have, but I know that feeling. That 3 o'clock in the morning, late night thing. And there's something that's simple that that it's simple and it's holding you up and you're doing that reset.
And to be fair to the guy, once we got it all figured out, it wasn't his fault that it was a 15-minute reset. Once we got it all figured out, he's fine. He did a good job. It looks great on camera. It's all fine. It's just, it took a while to get there. And at 3 a.m., everybody's nerves are just shot.
And by the way, good for him to stick for his guns. Like he doesn't know what that mushroom is. He's not going to, just eat something regularly.
We told him what it was.
Yeah, but I don't trust you. Who would trust you?
I wouldn't trust me. That's for sure.
But, one of the things in going back and watching this, I realized how good from the beginning Jeremy Benning is. I mean, to create this look and this feel of these sets, I mean, these work, does. In the scene when Miller finds the kids that were stealing the water, and we get to see Diogo for the first time. We get to meet, which is interesting to see Diogo. The part when he falls over and the barrel of water dumps on him, that's a phenomenal sequence of them going, and then it looks simple, but for that timing, for that bucket of water. To time it to where it to fall straight laterally where it's in the camera, the water to splash Miller and him fall right in front of the camera and then get up and then in all in sequence while they're running around the thing. That's a really, really tough thing to shoot. And it's really kind of blows my mind. And because the reset in that, because he gets soaking wet in it. So how many resets can you do? Were you there that day?
I was. It was a tough sequence to shoot. And again, for people who haven't worked on a film set before, this is a perfect example of everybody's doing a really complicated job. Because the camera has to be in exactly the right position for when that stunt happens. The stunt guy has set it up so that Tom can fall safely and all of that stuff. And the special effects guys have set that barrel up to fall a certain direction at a certain timing. And if any of those things doesn't work, if any of those things doesn't happen, you have to do the shot over again. So, I mean, whenever you see a complicated sequence like that on film, you just got to know there's like 12 or 15 really super complicated things happening all at the same time. And everything happens with like precision timing for it to work.
In order to do that on a TV show when you have no time, But what I really liked about that scene, I think Thomas is very good in that scene, is you see him have this empathy for these kids, for these young belters, because he was one of those street kids and he was doing similar things. And so it's, he has this conflict of doing his job, but also like taking it easy on these kids.
Yeah. And that's revealed when he lets Diogo go. They've caught him. He gives him a stern talking to, and then he just lets him go.
And so what was it about that scene? What is Diogo in the books?
Yeah, he is.
And his whole journey is what it was in the books?
No, he's only in the first book.
So did you just what made you decide to carry him through?
Well, I mean that was
because he ends up being an important character.
He does. That was mostly Narain's idea as the showrunner. What we wound up realizing we needed to explain Marco Inaros. We knew he was coming, 5 seasons away, but we knew he was coming. And so Diogo became our radicalized belter. He starts out as just a dumb kid running around, stealing some water on the docks, getting in trouble with the cops. Not really a bad guy, but, a street kid. And then seeing the things that happen on Eros and being changed by that, being radicalized by that, and then deciding that he's going to become a freedom fighter. And then we see him with, the drop team in season 2, where he's going in to plant the bombs with Miller. And he thinks he's a freedom fighter. Well, and later in season 1, his uncle is killed in front of him. He sees that happen, and he decides that he's going to become a freedom fighter. And then we see this sort of the naive season 2 version of him, the one who thinks he's a hero now. And then we go into season 3 and we see the sort of OPA thug version of him, where now he's with Ashford and he's wearing the uniform and stealing the Martian gear, and you just watching him get radicalized across the seasons.
So it was kind of Narain's way of personalizing this story of this kid growing up and becoming radicalized.
Yeah,
because it's such a great way to do that, because everybody falls in love with him. He's this lovable guy, and then you see what emotionally propelled him to start making the decisions that he made.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you take a guy who doesn't have much because he starts out as a criminal, and then you kill his uncle in front of him. The inner planets, the Martians, kill his uncle in front of him, and then you kill 100,000 other belters in a science experiment that he's aware of. Yeah, I mean, this is how you create radicals. You take kids who don't feel like they have any stake in the future, don't feel like they have any stake in the rewards of being a good citizen, and you give them lots of reasons to hate you, and that's what they turn into. They turn into radicals. I mean, it's a pretty easy to understand formula.
So, and then back on the night, the scene where Alex and Shed are losing air. Alex is losing air. He's getting hypoxia, and Shed is having to take care of him, and he's sharing his air. I thought that's a great scene, and they both were very good in it. And I tell you, when I go back and watch this, I miss Shed. I think he's such a great character, and I don't want to jump ahead too much, but losing Shed, going back, and I realized what a great character he was, and the story. Well, I guess we'll get to that when we get to that episode.
Yeah, I know. Paolo is very funny. He's very charming on screen. He's got perfect comic timing. Some of the lines he delivers are perfectly timed for maximum funny. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that we do in the show over and over again, though, is we make you fall in love with somebody so that we can kill them.
Was real life Shed? Was he a funny guy?
In the game, or do you mean the person?
The in the game, the person, the real life person.
Yeah, no, he was never written to be like a particularly funny character, I don't think.
But what was he like? The guy that created Shed?
Well, I didn't know him personally. That was all online. Yeah.
Oh, it was online. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, his name is Eric. I knew, we knew each other through like the internet, but I had never hung out with him in person.
So you would do the role-playing games online?
Yeah. Yeah.
Would it be like Zoom like this? Or, it was before.
No, this was the old days. It was what they call play by post, where you have a forum, like a internet forum where you can post comments, and people would say, I want my guy to do this and I want my guy to do that. And they would tell you what their character was doing. And then since I was running the game, then I would write a long, basically like extemporaneous short story of the effects of all those actions, the things that they did. And honestly, that's where I got a lot of my early writing sort of training. Is I probably wrote thousands of pages of text for that game stuff.
That's interesting. So during this time, was there friends of yours that you guys would get on this thing and do the game by?
Yeah, it was people. It was a forum that I was at the time, 20 years ago. I was spending a fair amount of time on that forum, so I knew all those guys as sort of internet personalities, and then a few of them I knew in real life.
So do you have like a platform where you're saying, okay, I'm running a game. Here's the thing of the game. Whoever wants to join, I have some friends that are already in, and then whoever wants to. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's the basic idea. Yeah,
yeah.
And then the idea was that everybody, turns in one turn per day, and then once a day I would write a little short story of what happens.
And what I really love about this episode is when you're starting to see the group learn who each other is, figure each other out. And you start to see what drives them, when they're going back and forth and saying, is this Martian? Is it not Martian? And Amos is like, who gives a fuck? Let's get out of here. Let's, it's that survival mode of like, let's take care of us. We'll worry about that later. But I do think that Holden, you start to see the seeds, because he was a reluctant XO. He didn't want any part of this responsibility, part of being a captain or part of being a crew. But there is a leadership quality in him that always rises up in the face of adversity, and he always has this compass of him doing the right thing.
He has a very clear compass about right and wrong. But even more than that, I think he has a very strong objection to things that are unfair. Amos, 50 of his friends get killed. Amos can go, well, I guess it sucks to be them, and he can just move on. Right. The fact that was unfair, that they were all killed for no reason. He's seen so many people killed for no reason that that's just a thing that happens. Right. Sometimes you get stepped on and, there's no way to see it coming, and that sucks. Mm-hmm. Whereas Holden sees that, and he sees the horrible unfairness of it, that these people were murdered seemingly for no reason by people who are going to get away with it. And the idea that those people are just going to murder 50 people and get away with it infuriates him. The unfairness of that. Yeah, you see this sort of extreme actions he will take. This some would say foolhardy actions he will take to make sure that those guys don't get away with what they just did.
That transmission that he makes is reckless. That is a reckless choice to make. It is an informed last ditch decision, but it's a reckless choice.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, heroism means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But my favorite version of that, my uncle, who was a Marine, one time told me that heroes are people who do shit that they wouldn't have done if they stopped and thought about it. That most of the time when we see somebody go, wow, what a heroic thing, like that person later goes, man, if I had stopped and thought about it, would I have
around, kid?
Nest? Probably not. In the moment, it seemed like a really good idea and you wanted to look out for your buddies. But then you wake up, with PTSD, night sweats later going, what the fuck was I thinking?
Right.
Yeah. And you hear soldiers and people in the military talk about that, don't try to win medals. Nobody should be trying to win a medal. That's just dumb.
Right. And then we end the episode with the Donager boarding the Knight.
Yeah.
And that's where we end. Yeah, I love going back, and I think now is the right time to do it 6 years later, going back and watching these episodes, because now we've lived in the character so long. I know the arc of seeing how everything started, how the foundation was being laid, and how the characters. It's really a great experience to go back and watch that, and then be able to digest it and talk to you about it, and then hopefully the fans will join in with us and get to go back and see it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting to revisit this stuff with so much distance, so much time and distance between it now.
Because when we first did it, I'm usually too connected in the shooting and remember everything that happens that I don't really watch it the first time as an objective viewer.
Yeah.
And then I never look back. I never go back and watch things, or I never even think about it. And I usually, forget about it. So the fact that we're doing this and it's kind of forcing me to go back and watch it, I'm watching it as a viewer that's watching it. And I don't really remember what happens in the story.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoy it. And I really appreciate how well it's written, how well it's shot. And it's a really, really cool thing to be a part of.
I will tell you, we started out talking about, the things you want to get back, the things that you watch it later and you go, oh man, I wish I had that to do over again. There's a moment in the scene with you and Holden on top of the Knight trying to fix the antenna, where it is scripted that Holden bangs his hand against the hull, jarring the big wrench out of his hand. And because the Knight is under thrust, the wrench sort of bounces down the hull and flies off behind the ship. And in the first season, especially, it was really hard to get everybody to understand the concepts of gravity and how thrust gravity works and all of that stuff. Like we created charts we hung on the wall so people would understand it. It was all really complicated. So when the visual effects people did that scene, they have the wrench just come out of his hand and then fly off sideways, which makes no sense at all. Like there's no way that would ever happen. It's nonsense. But by the time, we saw it, it was so far into the process, it was kind of too late to fix it. So that's one of those ones I wish we could get back because, and then eventually the visual effects people got to the point where they were correcting us on stuff. They're going, no, that's not how it would work in gravity. So they eventually all learned how all that stuff works. But in that first couple episodes, it was still kind of hit and miss. Because of that wrench that flies out of Holden's hand has appeared in every season of the show. We bring that wrench back every season as a reminder to ourselves of the shit we fucked up and we can't get back.
Was there any, before I go on, to that point, I go back, and now that I've known Amos the way I have, because now you and I have this, this connection, this relationship, and this conversation about Amos where I can call and we can talk about, do we think that this is the right path? Because now that people, when they come to work on the show, that they've seen the show and now they're familiar with Amos and who he is. I don't know if you remember, but the early struggles of, I read The Churn early on, and it's like, okay, this is the father of the man, right? This is where he came from. This is what I'm building him off of. Yeah. But early on, you have different directors, you have different writers, you have people coming from all over the place, and they would have different ideas of who this guy was. And I feel as if, it was a struggle, in some ways, sometimes with a new director, and he would say, hey, how about Amos say this? And it's like, that's just, not how it's going to go. But now going back and looking at it, I think that, it's like we the understanding of Amos and the it starts to evolve over time and around it.
Yeah, that's definitely true on the directing side. We were fortunate that we got you to play Amos because, when we were auditioning for that part, so many of the actors wanted to play him that way in the audition as like a tough guy. He was growling. He was like being threatening. Very few of the actors understood that Amos never makes a threat.
Mm-hmm.
You know who the two were that got it? This is going to be funny to you because you know this guy. It was you and it was Elias Tufexis.
Oh yeah.
Elias read for Amos, and he also came in with that understanding of the character. When he did that scene, he never threatened Holden. He never growled at him. He never, tried to play like a badass. He just he did the same thing you did. He just stated it as fact.
Right.
Yeah. So you guys were the two best. And part of that, and Elias actually wound up reading for a bunch of different parts on The Expanse, and part of that was the reason we always wanted to give him a role every season, because and
who did he end up playing? He ended up playing, what's the name?
Well, he plays the spy, Kenzo the spy.
Henzo.
Yeah. And then in later seasons, we had him do a bunch of motion capture work for us because he's a motion capture actor.
Yeah, he's the proto-molecule monster.
He's the proto-monster, yeah.
That Holden and I fight in the hangar bay.
Yeah, and the only reason he didn't do stuff in the last couple seasons is because he had moved to LA. If he was still in Toronto, we would have had him do more stuff.
The irony, he moves to LA and loses a job. Yeah. I love Elias. He's a great guy. And
and here's the thing that
he's a really good actor.
That's what I was just about to say. People don't give him enough credit as an actor. He's actually a really good actor. And I hope he gets a lot more stuff now that he's gone to LA, because people need to be using him. He's good.
Who doesn't give him enough credit?
Well, I mean, you kind of see him as like the character actor, right? He's he's Kenzo the spy. He's, you don't usually see him in sort of those lead roles.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But I think he could carry it. He's good.
Yeah, he's a really good actor. All right. Well, this concludes Ty and That Guy, season 1, episode 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let us know what you think. Like and subscribe. And we'll be back next week with episode 3,
where we'll talk about interrogations from psychic Martians.